Good evening, YouTube. Welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon, a retired New York City police detective with 20 plus years of law enforcement. And if you like all things true crime from a police perspective, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you will get all things DutyRon when I go live or when I upload another video. And tonight we're going to talk about the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow Daybell possible upgrade of charges coming up forward in the next few weeks. There's been a special grand jury convened for a 3-day block, I believe, in June. And we're going to get into it with a few guests. I'm going to have two folks that have been on in the past, retired homicide detective of Phil Grimaldi and criminal defense attorney Joe Murray. We're going to talk briefly about what the strategy is here. But I want to say a special thank you to my Patreon supporters, the channel members, and all of the folks who subscribe and positively interact here in this DutyRon community. It's important that you guys understand how important you guys are to make this community work. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys for acting and doing the right thing when it comes to respecting victims and their families of all of these crimes that we speak about. So a special shout out to all of my folks tuning in. The roll call is something that we always look forward to. Before we get into a brief timeline of the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow saga, you know, they've been labeled the cult couple, right? So many people, I think it's around six bodies, 6 people have died around these two. And I always question in my mind if there's more or if there's more death to animals. He has the pet cemetery on his property. And remember when he talked to his wife and said, I had to shoot a raccoon or something in the tree to cover up for the activities with, I believe, disposing of JJ and Ty Lee. So special hello to everybody joining, to my moderators. Thank you to the replay viewers. Much love and respect from my house to yours. So I'm going to bring on, without further ado, because he's waiting in the back, is retired detective Phil Grimaldi. Thank you, Phil, for joining. It's always a pleasure to have you here, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's good to see you again, and thank you for having me back, Ron.
Yeah, this case is a doozy, and I know I put it in your lap earlier today. You really didn't have much time to research it, but as you and I spoke about before, you know, when you do this type of work, it's not too difficult to just jump on in. When you sometimes get the double bags of, you know what, and you're working on cases, you know, and things are just like all over the place. We seem to work it out. This is an intricate case. It's got a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people who have come to their demise around Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell. You know, several of her previous husbands, her brother, her 2 children, and Chad Daybell's wife. Any thoughts before? And I love to get somebody like yourself who's kind of green. Phil, you can attest to that. You really don't know much about this case, just what you read about it today. I always love to get a law enforcement's professional perspective, and somebody like yourself who has investigated hundreds of homicides over the course of your career in the NYPD, over 20 plus years in the NYPD. What's your thoughts on this case?
Well, like you said, we didn't really have a lot to go on the case before today. I had heard about it briefly in the news media, and I think you pointed out a really good point when you said that we have professional experience. A lot of times in the media, and I'm not knocking any specific reporter or anything, we all know about how the media is today, but a lot of times they'll make assumptions on things, and we know the law. We've had previous experience in cases, so we can give a really good educated guess on a lot of the things that take place in these type of cases. And I think that's where the specialty of yourself and the DutyRon podcast, that you're hitting good points. Going back to this case now, I mean, there's a lot of dead bodies around these people. There's some very strange happenings that took place over the course of many years. There appears to be maybe obviously the two young children were found on the property of Chad. He had this pet cemetery. There was also talk at one time, I believe it was in December of maybe 2019 or 2020, where the police were called and by her previous husband, and he wanted her to seek some mental help. She was talking about different the world coming to an end and preparing for that. And I think there was also talk in one of the articles that I did read that she thought that the young girl Tylee was possessed or something to that effect.
Yes. And I have up on the screen, Phil, a little bit of written timeline of events, and I'm going to go full screen with it, but our audio is still there. Let me just get my mouse situated. All right, so we're in the background. I know this is kind of small, but I'm going to read just a little bit of the chain of events. Chad and Tammy Daybell were married March 9th of 1990 in Manatee, Utah, according to her obituary. The couple lived in Springfield, Utah, and then they moved to their home in Salem, Idaho in 2015. In 2006, the marriage records show Lori married her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Lori entered the marriage with her son, Colby, and Tylee, the daughters with their third husband, Joseph Ryan Jr. These are all previous husbands who are deceased now. Social media posts indicate that sometime in 2014, the Vallows moved to the island of Kauai in Hawaii, and the couple operated a small business on the island as indicated by business records. The family then moved back to the mainland in 2016 and 2017. While the Vallow family lived in Arizona, Tylee's father, Joseph Ryan, died April 3rd of 2018. According to the copy of the medical examiner's report, the cause of death was ruled a heart attack. And we're going to find that heart attacks and lung-related deaths are some of the things that are just standing out to me, because this is unusual to have spouses die of these similar types of events. Cause of death was ruled a heart attack. He was cremated immediately with little or other information available about his death. Almost a year before public announced the cases, Chad and Lori made their first appearance together, preparing a people's podcast, The Time to Warrior Up. Now, this was the Doomsday podcast that they were involved with, where they prepared people for the end of the world. And this is where things got really sensationalized with Lori Vallow. She became infatuated with Chad Daybell. He was a writer. He had books out, and she became obsessed with this guy while she was still married. Without going into a whole bunch of details, it jumps into 2019. Body cam footage shows Charles Vallow pleading for Lori to receive mental health. That's her husband at the time. At a community bridges on January 31st, 2019, officers determined that she had a normal state of mind and she was medically cleared by the community bridges. 2 months after the podcast begins, Charles files for divorce from Lori in February. He claimed she viewed herself as a god preparing for the second coming of Christ. So this is, without going further here, this is just extreme religion as well as crazy thought process. I mean, I don't know what what your take is on that, but these are, the two of them are extremists in their thoughts, and a lot of people feel that this was definitely a cult type situation. Any thoughts on that, Phil?
Well, obviously, she was exhibiting bizarre behavior all the way back to 2019 when the husband called the police, but I'm sure it went back further than that. Like you said, there was a couple of husbands that passed away and lung related issues. So, and I think the latest husband before Chad was cremated. So there's nothing that they can go on there as far as exhuming a body and looking for evidence. But, it sounds like this whole thing was morphing over time, and the belief that she was a god and the whole thing. It was very bizarre.
Right, right. And the thing of it is that what we're here to talk about tonight is that, they conducted the search warrants at Chad Daybell's residence. He had the pet cemetery, and they exhumed the bodies of JJ and Tylee. They had collected a decent amount of DNA and all different types of evidence. They took in some of the tools of his trade, maybe the shovels, bobcats. I don't know what he used on that property, but the FBI, the state and the feds, the locals, they took in a lot of things when they did the search warrant at his location. And there was the argument a week and a half ago about the DNA evidence. The defense didn't want the prosecution to use all the DNA evidence. They want to use it to process their case and make their case stronger. But of course, the defense wants to have that DNA evidence so they can present a proper defense against it. So that's all in limbo right now. But right now, what is new and on the plate and everybody's excited about is the potential for these charges, because they're only charged with tampering with the dead human body, tampering with evidence, and some bullshit charges. Excuse my language. Some charges. So, again, at the end of the day, everybody wants to see justice for these two children who were brutally murdered. We also want to see her previous husbands and his previous wife get justice as well. But you're talking about two children who were brutally beaten and brutally murdered, and it is just despicable what went on between the two of these folks. And anybody that didn't agree with what they were talking about or doing seemed to have met their demise.
Yeah, that's just in a nutshell. It's a horrible thing. The way that I remember what I did see in the media, the kids were missing. They were believed to be possibly dead, and they had a television camera following them over in Hawaii. They seemed very aloof about the whole thing. They weren't answering any questions. These sounded like and appeared to be very cold-blooded, methodical killers, is the only way to put it. Yeah. The evidence that you were talking about that they're going to rule on whether or not some of the evidence is going to be kept for the defense. I think if Joe joins us, he could probably speak about that a little bit more. But what I think it is they want to have a sample for the defense to test as well as the prosecution, which the prosecution recovered the evidence. They'll do the testing. But I believe it sounds like they want them to preserve some of the evidence so that it can be tested by their independent or their own team to evaluate whatever evidence they recovered. I think that the young lady was mutilated and her body was burnt. The young girl, Tylee. And so if there was any evidence that would have tied Chad or Lori to the actual murder, or even the brother-in-law or the brother of Lori, Alex, it may have been destroyed with the fire. However, the second body of JJ was, I believe, just the autopsy revealed he died of suffocation, right. And the body was buried. When that happens, there's a good chance, a lot of times evidence is preserved because it's buried underground. It doesn't have a chance to be open to the elements, rain, wind, heat, sun. So there may be some good evidence recovered on his body. So that may be one of the things that are going to be presented at this grand jury, obviously blood evidence and other things. And you mentioned the tools. He had a pet cemetery on his property. He used a backhoe probably or some type of digging equipment. They did recover blood evidence on some tools. And I believe they also found some blood in the area where the pet cemetery is on his property. So I'm sure all of that is going to be presented to the grand jury. The initial charges, they mentioned a charge of desertion of your children and non-support of dependent children. I believe those charges were lodged against her initially to hold her in custody. The investigation continued. Over time, they developed enough information for a search warrant on his property, and that's when they discovered the bodies. That's when he was arrested. So now we're probably into the phase where the grand jury is going to hear all the evidence from when they were arrested. I believe she was arrested in, well, the bodies were recovered June 9th of 2020, and that's when he was arrested. That's when Chad was arrested, and she may have been arrested February of 2020. So in between that time, they had her in custody. They continued the investigation. Now they probably recovered a lot of evidence regarding the recovery of the bodies. And then the investigation continues. He was arrested. And I'm sure that there was a mention there of Alex's cell phone pinging at the location the day after they were at the Yellowstone Park for a visit. That was on September the 8th. On September the 9th of 2019, the next day, his phone pinged at the location. So there was great suspicion that he was involved in it. And there was a text message where Chad sent a message that he had shot a raccoon or some animal and he buried it there. So these were all cover stories, obviously, to try and cover up the heinous, despicable crime that they had committed.
Yeah, these two are evil, no doubt. And I'm going to show just a little bit of media about the autopsy that's been completed for Chad Daybell's late wife, Tammy Daybell. And you have to shout out your daughter. She's in the chat. She just put in a thing. Annabelle says,
Annabella.
Yeah, Dad,
yeah, here she is.
help me out, bro.
That's my little Bella. That's my baby.
Okay. Well, there's the shout out. Let's get right to this media here. I want to play quickly for you guys. It's old, but I want everybody to hear it and see it.
The Fremont County Sheriff's Office has received the autopsy report on Tammy Daybell's body from the Utah Medical Examiner, but they are not releasing it to the public just yet. Daybell was the former wife of Chad Daybell, the man charged in the disappearance of the two children that were later found buried on his property. The children belonged to Lori Vallow, Daybell's current wife. He married her shortly after Tammy's death. Tammy's body was exhumed after it was previously reported that she died of natural causes in 2019. Sheriff's Office is not making the findings public since there is an ongoing investigation.
So that's just a little bit of tidbit. I wanted to just put that out there. Dr. Ed, thank you so much, Dr. Moskowitz, for the $20 super chat. Much appreciated. You know, this is a twisted case. A lot of people asking questions. When's the hearing? I read that the grand jury is going to convene June 9th. And then on another piece of information I read, it was going to be the 17th to the 19th of this month. I'm going to look into that and I'll get back to you guys on an exact date, but I'm almost certain it's going to be a little bit in the, it's probably going to be in June. But nevertheless, I have Joe Murray, who has joined us. He has come in generously. I appreciate on a last minute. Joe Murray is a retired New York City police officer and also a criminal defense attorney. And I want to welcome Joe to the show. Thank you so much. You got to unmute your mic. Welcome into the broadcast, Joe Murray. I appreciate you. Thank you.
There he is.
How are you, fellas? Good to see you.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
How are you, brother?
Very good.
So, Joe, this is a case where they're looking to upgrade charges to murder, or potentially a lesser. I wouldn't say lesser conspiracy to commit murder or murder. And the prosecutor is convened a grand jury, but they did it with the grand jury so they can actually keep what evidence they have from being put out public. And I know you know the answer of why they did that. Maybe you could tell some of the listening audience maybe what the tactic is there to have a grand jury convene kind of privately.
Sure. This is nothing new. Phil could tell you this. The grand jury, the DA only puts on enough to get an indictment. They're not trying to get a conviction in the grand jury. Grand jury is just to establish probable cause for the charges. So they're not going to put forth all of their evidence. This is typical in a prosecutor's office. They don't want to tip their hand as to what they know and have and what they don't know and don't have. So it's definitely a strategic move. They want to hold back and not show everything, because this is an ongoing investigation and it's going to have twists and turns. The evidence may go in different directions. So I think at this point, they want to play it safe and just put forth enough to establish the probable cause.
Yes. And Phil and I were talking about that before we went live. And I did an earlier live today. And a lot of the questions were coming up is like, what's all the secretive? This is from the viewers. What's with all the secretive stuff? The secretive stuff is to keep the integrity of the investigation, and also to be able to convene a jury of the peers of people of the state that they do the trying in. And there's an argument that, well, a crime committed in Idaho, a crime was committed in another state. Where are they going to try this case? That's a whole nother thing to try to iron out when you have different bodies coming from different locations. His wife in a different location as opposed to the kids. So that's where it gets a little complicated, because they're both being tried together.
Well, Ron, you're right about that, and not tainting a potential jury pool, but also a grand jury is a secret proceeding. It's not something that should be broadcast and publicized. Those people go in there and testify in confidence that the grand jury can then hear them and vote on whether or not they found probable cause.
Correct. Yeah, I led you into that because I wanted the audience to hear from a professional like yourself. This guy is a defense attorney. So, I talk about that all the time. Getting a true bill, getting the indictment, as we call it, a true bill, is one step of three: the summary arrest, the indictment, and then, a conviction at trial or a non-conviction.
Sure.
There's a ton of circumstantial evidence. There's a ton of physical evidence against these folks. But one of the viewers here said earlier, why is it taking so long for them to bring murder charges? And I kind of explained it to another viewer earlier in the comment section. And what I said was, when you don't have actual visual of someone committing a crime, and you have evidence, circumstantial evidence, and it piles up, that's how these cases sometimes, when they're in the middle of nowhere, they're in the middle of the country. There's no like what we're used to. You could walk down Fifth Avenue and you could be picked up by 15 different video cameras. That doesn't exist out in the middle of Idaho or out in the middle of the country. And the prosecution and the investigators, it's a tough thing to put together, and it takes time.
Ron, the district attorney that's handling the case, because both of the people were in custody, they had the opportunity to take their time and continue the investigation. There was no rush to do charges. I'm sure that they looked at everything very thoroughly and very carefully. And, when you do any kind of phone work or computer, they confiscated computers, they confiscated cell phones. That stuff is very time consuming. And then, along the way, I'm sure they did many, many interviews. I can't imagine how many investigators were working on this case. So I'm sure that the reason that it didn't come about so quickly was they weren't in a rush. They had them in custody, and it was better to be methodical about it, move slowly. And then once they're confident, they have everything wrapped up in a nice, neat bundle of what they're going to present to the grand jury to prefer the charges, that's when they proceed.
Yeah, very well said. And I spoke about this on a couple of previous live streams on different cases. When you have your perpetrators, you have your defendants in custody, it gives you that liberty to really dot your I's and cross your T's. And we witnessed that in the Suzanne Morphew case. They didn't have anybody in custody, but they had their potential suspect in a area, and he wasn't, leaving the country. They had eyes on him, and they conducted a year-long investigation and came out with murder first-degree charges against him based on a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence. But again, this is a case that has shocked the world because it involves an autistic boy and it involves a young girl, and many other people along the way where you can't even actually point the fingers at them because there's nobody that witnessed any of these crimes. But there's so much bizarreness surrounding it. That's what makes this case so interesting, is because everybody that looks at it says, how could this happen? How could this even happen in 2020 or 2019? In this day and age, most people, all eyes are on you, and it's hard for you to get away with murdering one person, let alone six. They got six. There's six people who died around these two. And there was talk about their podcast with Melanie Gibb. Chad Daybell, if you go and look at some of his writings and the books that he put out, it was right in line with that whole doomsday fortune thing. And I didn't read his books because I don't want to give that guy my dime, but I did read a little snippets in some of these chat rooms, and he was equally as a whack job as Lori was. Chad Daybell had extreme beliefs and religious beliefs, and he believed that the end of the world was coming as well, and he was on board with the preparation for that. Lori Vallow said to her friends that she felt that her daughter was a demon and that she needed to be taken care of. Well, somebody did it.
Ron, I just got to make a comment on that. Now, I hope that if their defense is going to be that they were delusional and they were believing in this crazy religion or what the doomsday scenario, they need to play that video of them in Hawaii after they gave away all the kids' belongings, took off to Hawaii, and when the news camera captured them and asked them questions about your children are missing, they were reported missing, I believe, by the grandparents. Where are your children? And they just very smugly and aloofly, ignored the cameras and they just went on with their Hawaii vacation. I mean, that to me is going to be very powerful if it comes to, a jury trial, that this was intentional. They were acting carefree after the murder. They gave away all their stuff. They went off to Hawaii. I mean, it's just blatant disregard for human life. And they did it without any, remorse or anything like that at all.
I have a video I want to show of exactly what you just said. This is just a 2-minute video, and I think it's important for the viewers to see this. I'm going to play this because it is really right up the alley of what you just said. This is Nate Eaton from East Idaho News, and he is in Hawaii on scene, and this is him following Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell.
Juice bar business here in this shopping complex. It's obviously no longer around anymore, but this is a place where a lot of tourists stop to buy souvenirs, to get a cup of coffee. There's a little grocery store just around the corner here. It's a very popular place, and it's likely that the business did okay.
Actually, this this isn't the one that I want to show, but let me take this off and cue up the next one. It was the next video. But anyways, that was a business that they were trying to show of what she had there in Hawaii. This guy has done.
It was Sunday afternoon.
This is it. Here it is.
Okay.
All right. DutyRon's got it on the second try. Guys, I suck at this sometimes. But anyways, here it is.
Resort, where Chad and Lori have been living for weeks, if not months. It's a really ritzy community. Several homes in here sell for over $1 million. It's gated, you can't get in. But last night, our photojournalist, Eric Grossarth, was able to go in as police concluded a search warrant on the townhome where Chad and Lori have been staying. We don't know what police were able to get out of that house. We do not know if Chad and Lori have returned. However, as of now, when I'm standing here, it looks as if nobody has been in the home since yesterday. Of course, Chad and Lori were in their black Ford Explorer, a rental car, when Kauai police pulled them over at the beach resort. They exited the car. Chad was put in one police SUV. Lori was put in another SUV.
That's them right there.
About 30 minutes later, they released both of them, but they seized their car. Chad immediately walked from his police car over to Lori. He grabbed her hand. That's when we approached them and tried to ask them a few questions that they did not want to answer. Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say? Now,
This
that
guy's
encounter
awesome.
happened here at the Kauai Beach Resort. It's unknown if Chad and Lori spent the night here last night, but this is a place that's very well known to Lori. Last February, after Charles Vallow filed for divorce from her, she came here and stayed for about a month with her daughter, Tylee. Then they left and moved back to the mainland. Now, I spoke with Kay Woodcock. She's the grandmother of little JJ. She did not know what was about to happen until she saw the news yesterday, and this is what she had to say. Did you know that they were here in Hawaii?
Did I know for sure? No, but I did have just knowing Lori, but then she's a different person now than she used to be, but nonetheless, she is a very cool-natured person. When she moved to Idaho, I thought that was extremely unusual because if it's below 80 degrees, she's cold and she's got a jacket on.
One of the things that Lori had was a plastic Ziploc with a bunch of cash inside. And that was actually hers inside the car that the police let her take. So she was moving around with this bag of cash. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I guess it really depends. Were there suitcases in that car?
They did not have suitcases when we spoke with them, but the police took the car. So
yeah, because I mean, maybe they were headed to the airport to get out.
Kay, do you believe that the children are still alive, or do you think maybe something more nefarious has happened?
Honestly, the only way we've been able to do this is we have very strong faith in God, and we have a very strong support.
All right, so that was enough. I wanted you guys to see the way he approached them and the way she just nonchalantly said, "Oh, that's nice. You know, where are your kids?" And her response to a news reporter was, "Oh, that's nice that you're interested in where my kids are."
Ron,
Hey,
can
Joe.
I be the defense attorney here?
I was just going to ask Joe if you think stuff like that will ever make it to the trial.
Well, I think obviously any of their observations, something like that could be. I don't know if that would actually be admissible. But what I wanted to say is, just as a defense attorney advising your clients, never talk to anyone, because as a defendant, anything you say to anyone there's a hearsay exception that any admissions or any kind of statement can be taken out of context and used against you. So the fact that they're not commenting to the press should not seem out of the ordinary. Nobody should be talking to the press when they are under arrest or investigation. And they have attorneys. That's just, rule of thumb. So I don't think it's appropriate to draw something from the no comment. Certainly their, behavior, vacationing away while their kids are missing, that's not well advised, but I certainly see your point, though.
Yeah, so she was taken into custody in Hawaii and extradited back to the States. He left on his own accord and showed up at her hearing when she was collared and brought before the judge before he got arrested. And then he got arrested. So, the two of them were there, and they thought it was okay to just leave and go to Hawaii. They figured, well, it's still the United States. I can go to Hawaii and say I didn't leave the country. It's a long way to go, but these people are just, they were living in a fantasy world where they thought they could just get away with whatever they did. And they felt, even right up until apprehension, confident that they could just do whatever they want. They were so cocky and so arrogant. Did you guys see her face and the way she reacted to that reporter? It was just like, whatever.
It was basically despicable in my eyes. And I'm not even sure that that's the news report that I saw a while back. There may have been another one where a camera team caught up with them. I think it looked like, if I remember correctly, she might have been out shopping or something like that. So maybe there's other video. And she seemed kind of aloof. And Joe's right. You know, the fact that they're not answering any questions, they could have just said no comment. They're obviously the subject of an investigation. That's fine. But the manner in which they left the United States, the children are missing. They're acting. They were no help to the police. They were evading questions by the police and by the investigators as to the whereabouts of the children. And then they just take off to Hawaii and go to some dream location, a resort. I mean, that shows really. I can't even think of the right words. Depraved indifference.
Yeah,
it's insane. It's insane.
As a parent, we look at that and you say to yourself, who could, with your children, I mean, now we know that, you know, what the fate was of these kids, but at that time, they were missing children. And she wasn't given any answers. But I found the clip. It's about a minute and a half. I want to play it. It's the full clip of this guy, Nate, following them. And the questions and the answers that they got from these two are unbearable. I want the audience to hear this. So I'm going to play it. Just bear with me a second. Share screen. There we go. So this is the full thing. This guy Nate should get an award for what he did. I mean, again, Joe, I know you cringe at this, but here we go.
Had a chance to ask them so many questions that need answers. Lori, Nate Eaton with East Idaho News. Can you tell me where your kids are? Where are your kids? No comment. No comment? They've been missing for 4 months. You have nothing to say? You're over here in Hawaii?
This guy.
Where are
awesome.
your children?
I love this guy.
Yeah, why don't you just give us a comment? Just tell us where they are. Chad, where are Lori's kids? What happened to Tammy, Chad? Can you tell us what happened to Tammy? Why have you guys been in Hawaii for so long? Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have.
This woman is a monster. And did you see Chad Daybell's face when they asked, "Where's Tammy?" That's his wife. What happened to Tammy?
Right.
And he gave a look, like an evil look, like unbelievable. But this journalist is, I mean, what a go-getter. I'd like to shake his hand if I ever saw him because he's got balls. So let's listen to the rest of this. It's almost over.
Nothing to say? Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive? That's a simple question. I've got 3 kids of my own. I can tell you every minute where my kids are at. Where are your children? What do you guys plan to do now? Are you have 5 days to get your children in front of a judge in Rexburg, then what? Are you guys innocent of any crimes? Have you committed any crimes? Chad, you guys have a lot to say on your podcast. You don't have anything to say now? Lori?
He's basically shoulder to shoulder with her.
Do you believe that you were instructed by God or others to do something for your children? If you could give a message to them, what would you say? Listen, if you just talk to us, we'll leave you alone.
Family's worried. Tammy's family's very worried.
Tammy's family's very worried. Lori, your mother, Kay, came out. Kay and Larry, they're offering a $20,000 reward for your children.
Look at her.
And you're over here on the beach. This is your chance to tell your story. Nothing you want to say? One last chance right here. Anything you want to say to the people in Idaho? Laura, you have a lot of cash there in your baggie. Were you guys planning to leave Hawaii? Were you planning to take off? And with that, Chad and Lori darted into this resort, and they still have not come out. Now, police have not said what they are searching for in that SUV.
That's unfreaking believable, man.
This kid, Nate, did a good job on that attempted interview. And what I remembered, I didn't see what I saw, the clip that I saw, it wasn't the beginning where you saw the police cars and stuff. It was them walking and him asking the questions. And at the time, I remembered it. They appeared so aloof about it. Meanwhile, the kids are missing for 4 months or something. You know,
It's sickening.
it really is.
Joe, I know that's a defense attorney's worst nightmare, right there.
Yes, I gotta tell you, there's some good things here that I'm glad I'm seeing as a defense attorney. One of the things is we fight so hard to keep our clients out of jail, out on bail, so they're able to go on with their lives, to be in the community. I learned this way back in the police department, because this is a police department tactic. When you're a police officer and you're in trouble, and you have a problem, say like with the CO, the first thing they do, what do? They modify you and transfer you out, because it's so much easier to get people to say bad things about you when you're not there. And when I say bad things, I'm not saying that you actually did anything bad, but once you're gone and now the rumors start flying, then people start saying, oh yeah, I remember that one time he did this, he did that. So my advice, and what I always try to tell, my clients, continue your normal lives. Stay in the community, do your normal routine, do what you always do. This is a terribly tragic situation, so they are going to modify their lives in some way, reasonably, but going to Hawaii was the worst thing they could have done.
I agree 100%.
100% agree on that.
I played this in part because I want people to see these two are in custody right now and they are in jail and they're not going anywhere. And now they're convening a grand jury to look to indict them on murder. I want people, the viewing audience, to see how much of scumbags the two of these were. These two, this man and this woman had no regard for children's lives, for human beings' lives. They were stone cold, just ice cold, no emotion, the way they acted there. I purposely played that because in the coming weeks and in the coming months, you are going to see these two on trial for murder, first degree. I believe, and I think that this is going to be good for us to see this and look back on this. And Nate Eaton, I tip my cap to him. What a great job at East Idaho News. I will link down below a link to his professional media page. I mean, he did a fantastic job of documenting the shit that these two were involved in. And these are ruthless, really evil, sick monsters. These are the type of people that where they are now, they're better off. The world is better off without people like this around, because 6 people lost their lives around the two of these two. Ron, I
wanted to comment on one thing. You mentioned that there was the other case that they were being charged with or tried on. Now, my understanding is if it's in the same state, it could be tried in the same county. But if it's another state, that's a different jurisdiction altogether. They may be facing other murder charges when they do the autopsy on an exhumed body, or if they find out from the previous husbands if there was any foul play in those cases. So this may, and I know that the FBI was involved in the case, so this may be, unless it's charged federally, then they can rope it all into one case. But I think it's going to be charged on a state level with the 2 young children that were killed. And then if the other murder of the ex-wife was also in that state, then maybe they can charge that one as well. But I think these people are going to be facing several trials. I don't think it's going to be just one.
I agree. You're absolutely right. The jurisdictional boundaries of the state, and it depends on each state, has, little exceptions. It's going to be another jurisdiction that brings that case to trial.
Right. And the thing of it is too, is that we have to wait to see what is the results as these steps go on. It's a process. And, we're all invested in this because we're parents, we're human beings, we're caring people. But at the end of the day, we have to take the baby steps because there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of technicalities. There's going to be, the defense for Chad Daybell and the defense for Lori Daybell Vallow Daybell, whatever the hell you want to call her. Those 2 defense attorneys are on the ball. They're on point. So they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's, and they're representing their clients very well. And most people really can't stand them,
but they should do that.
I know
They should
the feeling.
represent them the right way. They should give them the fair, the way that the criminal justice system works in this state. In this country, and so that way there can't be no overturned convictions or anything like that. So they deserve the due process, 100%. We said that before in other podcasts that we did.
Right. So one of the viewers, Jolene Marie, says, I believe it's 4 states, 8 agencies involved, last I heard. So there you go. Let me just turn it over to the chat really quick, because we've been hogging up the airwaves here. So I want to say a special thank you to my channel members, my Patreon supporters, and everybody who subscribes to this great community. This is fact-based from a law enforcement perspective. DutyRon, Crime Talk, Crime Time with DutyRon. I have tons of law enforcement professionals. We have a defense attorney here, Joe Murray, Bill Cannon, a retired homicide supervisor out of Manhattan North. Just a ton of really great people. Barbara Butcher came on and spoke about this case with Bill Cannon maybe 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, and we talked about the autopsy. She gave some great information. I'm going to link that broadcast in a couple of cards in this video and down below, so you guys can go and look at some of that information that we spoke about. I want to just say too is that we have to trust the process. You guys have to be confident and also patient with the prosecution, with the defense. This is all part of the process. And the reason I bring on these guys here is not just to have them toot their own horn, but it's educational for you guys who might not understand this, because don't forget, we have people from South Africa, Australia, the Netherlands, the UK. The systems are different when you go outside the country. So some people don't really have a good grasp on what the law is here in the United States and how our justice system works. So at the same time, this is educational. So I appreciate you guys coming on with this. We are going to follow this closely. And I want to just, if you guys don't mind, ask a few people in the audience if you have some questions for my guests. If anybody has any questions for the guests, I will now start looking at the chat. If you have a question, if you want it to be highlighted and you send it by super chat, that always helps. I could just put it right up on the screen, but if I find a question that's good, I will certainly ask it.
Hey Ron, if you if in the course of your asking your viewers for questions, I have a question I'd love to hear. As an attorney, it's these are potential jurors. So I would love to hear how people feel about DNA. Is it hard science that, once you see it, you're done, you made up your mind? Or is it junk science? Is it something that you would really, look at the human error possibility in the collection and processing and testing of this DNA material?
So the question Joe put out there, criminal defense attorney, is what do you guys think of DNA evidence? Put some messages in the chat. Dawn Marie says guilty and done.
Joe would definitely knock her off of the jury pool.
I'm exercising a preempt on her.
I'd love to see what Joey Brooklyn has to say. Joey Brooklyn, okay, here's another one. DNA would make up my mind, says April Story. Here's another one from Mary Glick. I believe in DNA. DNA is science. Princess Michelle says DNA doesn't lie. I know for a fact. I'd like to get her on panel.
Yes.
I trust DNA 100%, says Nancy Britt. Listen, Joe, this is a good polling that you did here.
I'm telling you, I had a case, a 5-time convicted burglar, right? The only connection, the only nexus they had to this particular burglary, was a cigarette butt found in the apartment. And of course, his DNA, because he's in the system, popped a match, and they hit him. And we ended up with a hung jury. It was 8-4, not guilty. So the DNA was not persuasive.
But did he have opportunity to be in that apartment some other time, or he had no connection at all?
No connection at all to the person. And I just raised basic questions. about cigarettes. Hey, can I get a light? Somebody takes a cigarette, you know, they're puffing on it, they share it, they do something. You don't know. I mean, you have to. And then the cigarette was found underneath. There was a little doggy bed, and it was underneath the dog. And I said, how do we know that dog didn't pick it up in its hair and it ended up in the apartment? We don't know. You must know with beyond a reasonable doubt. If there's any doubt, you can't convict. So it's not so much the DNA, it's the process of collecting it and determining whose DNA it is. They only take a very, very small sample of whatever they're testing.
Right.
You know, so it's, and there's such things as transfer DNA. If I shake your hand, Phil, you have my skin cells in your hand, and you may touch a murder weapon, and then I get popped. You know, it's not that exact. And for a defense attorney, all we need is reasonable doubt. And I think there is reasonable doubt in a lot of circumstances.
Right. In addition to the DNA evidence, one person put in the chat, and one only. I want to go back to see it, but basically, here it is. I was a juror, says Fuzzy Doxy. I would need all the facts.
Of course.
That's a good juror right there. So overwhelming majority says DNA is the real deal. I'm putting it all up here. A super chat came in with $10 from Okie Dokie, and Okie Dokie said DNA evidence can make or break a case, in my opinion. But that's in someone's opinion. That's probably not an attorney. So you would beg to differ with that. Joey Brooklyn says DNA 99.99, but it depends on the circumstances and how it's presented.
That's reasonable. That's
I
reasonable.
think that's reasonable, Joey Brooklyn. And I don't just say that because he's one of my goombats from Joey Brooklyn from Brooklyn. I say it because that's true. What were you going to say, Phil?
I was going to say, Joe, you obviously created doubt in that case, and you did your job. That's what an attorney's job is to do. But there's something else in this case that I don't know if you're aware of it. We talked about it before we went on the air. When she was being questioned about the whereabouts of her children, she contacted, I'm not sure if it was a friend or a relative, and asked her to lie and say that the children were in Arizona. The friend went to the FBI or to the authorities, to the police, and gave her up. That's another thing that I'm sure they'll bring her into the trial to testify about that, and the defense is going to have to get around that one. Maybe you want a little comment on that, Joe?
Right. That's very damning, but I would dive into the relationship. Is there any animus? Is there prior, bias, or, is she telling the truth? So yeah, it's definitely damning on its face, but you have to wonder, why would she really ask somebody to lie like that who, may not have that, close relationship with her, So maybe it's someone who is estranged to her and they have an axe to grind, or have an opinion about the case. You really just have to, do a deep dive into the relationship and the context. But you never give up. As a defense attorney, you push that to the edge. Test the veracity of all evidence.
And Mark Means is the defense for Chad Daybell, and this guy is a bulldog. He's going at every aspect of these of what's to this date as the process is going forward. And we are in the infancy stage of this case. The investigation is already done for the most part, but his defense is really on the money when it's coming to questioning and standing up for the rights of his client. So kudos to him. I don't like him because he's good.
I got to hand it to Joe. That was
you need him.
I
got to hand it to Joe. That was a pretty good argument he made with the friend that she contacted about lying for her. That was a good argument, Joe. I got to hand it to you.
Listen, we got to work the angles.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And you certainly came up with a good one on that, and that was quick. So that was good, Joe. That was good.
Yes. So Mark Means is Lori Vallow Daybell's attorney. So I'm getting corrected. Listen, I'm 57 years old. My mind is foggy sometimes, and it's 10 o'clock, so 10:30.
There's a lot in this case too. There's a million names. There's a million locations. There's a lot of a lot to talk about over the course of maybe the last 4 or 5 years. So I sympathize with that. When I was trying to make some notes on this, it was like, wow, there's a lot in this case.
Right. Pryor is Chad's lawyer. So yeah, the two lawyers, they're going at it, and they are questioning the prosecution. They're challenging the judge. They're asking for all the different things that they should be doing for their clients. And you know what? Kudos to them. But at the end of the day, I think that I'm hoping that they have a good, strong case, and these two scumbags don't see the light of day. They are not good people, and again. As we heard in a very famous trial, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. I mean, I hope we don't come to that in this, and I hope everything is they dotted their I's and crossed their T's. Go ahead, Phil. Look
One quick point about they showed no emotion, obviously. And when my children were little, I would tell them to when they would go out to play, I would say, listen, if God forbid something happens to you and you get hit by a car, God forbid, Daddy's going to be in a corner, rolled up in a ball, being useless as a human being. Now, her two children were missing, presumed dead, and she was vacationing in Hawaii. So that I think says it all right there.
Correct. I agree.
Yeah, not a good look.
There's some questions in the chat, like DutyRon. Why is this not being charged federally when Yosemite was involved? They were at a federal park. The kids were last seen with her brother Alex, but I don't think they actually know, or I mean, maybe they do, but I don't think they actually know the actual place of death or the time of death, obviously. So you can't just pinpoint it on presumption. Can't assume that they were killed in that park, a federal park.
It doesn't seem likely, Ron. From what I read, it seemed like they wanted people who might have been in the park that day to maybe took a picture of them, in the background or something. I guess just to see what their physical appearance was at the time, or maybe something to that effect. It seems like it happened in and around that property that Chad owns.
Right. Dawn Marie is saying exactly, Joe. Not a good look. Dawn Marie is a moderator and a good friend. Thank you, Dawn, for that. There's a couple other things here. Wait a minute. Hold on. Where did it go? Shit. Oh, here we go. So April's story says, how could you commit 6 possible murders and not make one mistake? They're in custody right now.
I think they made quite a lot of mistakes.
It's impossible. You're going to make mistakes. Nobody's that perfect,
I think
what I used to say? I used to say, when you start thinking about killing someone like that, you're already making a mistake. The minute you start thinking about it, you're making a mistake somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
I think that they definitely up pretty good, so they got enough evidence to go forward with potential upgrading of these charges, and that's what we've been talking about for almost a year here. We want to see these charges upgraded to what they should be in the court of public opinion, and also it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that these two are involved in some pretty bad shenanigans when it comes to human life. So
just remember, though, because a lot of people, the court of public opinion, when you talk about that, our system is set up where you need 12 strangers to come together, view this evidence, debate it, and unanimously come to the conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt. That is such a high burden. It is such a high burden, and it should be. You're going to convict somebody of a heinous crime or any crime. It really should be a high burden to prove that. And a lot of times, and I do this as a defense attorney, maybe the evidence points to my client being guilty. Maybe it's possible he's guilty, but unless you're sure that he's guilty, you're required. The judge is going to tell you, you're required to return a verdict of not guilty. We cannot have doubt about this, reasonable doubt. So don't be surprised. There's a lot of evidence in these cases. Some of it is going to be contradictory. There's going to be some issues. And that is what defense attorneys exploit and show maybe there's some doubt about this.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's where when the jurors will be deliberating, the deliberation process, that's where all of that gets aired out, and they discuss it, and they weigh out the evidence, and a great closing statement like you just made, I'm sure, is powerful and impactful. But listen, there's many things might not even make it to the trial because they'll be contradicted beforehand in hearings and stuff. But
yeah,
they have a lot of time on their hands. They're doing a big investigation. I'm sure they're going to recover a lot of evidence if they haven't already. And as they go on, it'll be in the hands of those 12 people. And it should be, like you said, beyond a reasonable doubt, 100%. All 12 have to agree on it, and that's our system.
And listen, I think we could all agree that this is going to be a bumpy road. This is not going to be a straightforward ground ball, double play ground ball. It's going to provide us with a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotional roller coaster rides. Again, there's so many moving parts to this case. There's so many different variables. There's so many different things. I think it will be talking about this for the months to come, and perhaps even for the next year. This could drag out a whole year or more, depending on how long it takes for them to convene a grand jury, a jury of the peers. And there's question that how are they going to be able to do that? Because this is such a widely talked about case, and I think that's one of the things circling back to keeping stuff close to the not out in the public, not to leaking it out to Nate Eaton and all these news people who are going to report on it. That's why you're not hearing some of the inner details of what they have. They're trying to keep it so when it does come to game time, you're on a level playing field. Correct, Joe? That's
exactly right. I look at the George Floyd case. That case went to trial. I mean, you guys know this. Murder cases linger. They linger. There's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of, even pre-trial publicity is a ground to delay a trial. You don't want the jury to be tainted. And the fact that they had so much pre-trial publicity and even while the trial was ongoing. So I think a lot of these prosecutors in these big high-profile cases are looking to see what the court does, whether or not they uphold that conviction or reverse it because there was so much pretrial publicity. And I think it's in everyone's best interest if they delay it somewhat.
I agree. So many questions coming in. A lot of people are complimentary about you guys. A couple of ladies say Joe's handsome. I don't know where that's coming from, but
I don't know, but don't say that too loud. My girlfriend's here.
Well, I get it too. It's a compliment. They're not asking for a date. They're just saying you're handsome. So that's good.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
We have over 500 people watching now for an hour, and I greatly appreciate the professionalism from my guests here. I hope you guys out in the audience consider subscribing to this channel, hitting that notification bell, and also giving it a thumbs up and sharing onto your social media platform. Again, I have retired NYPD police officer Joe Murray, who is a criminal defense attorney. He has his own business. I'm going to link his website down below also, if it's okay with you, Joe.
Please. I linked you to my website too as well.
So I'm going to link down in the description how to get a hold of Joe Murray if you're ever in need of criminal defense attorney here in New York. He does a lot of other things as well. Detective Phil Grimaldi, over 20 plus years, 22, right, Phil?
Yep.
22 years with the NYPD. He's handled major homicide cases. You worked in the
6-0 squad and retired out of the intelligence division.
Yeah, so he was in the elite intel division, and he's done a lot of great things. So kudos to my guests here. I hope you guys will consider coming back and chiming in on this case as we cover it, because I will be covering this extensively. We have a lot of other things in the mix going on. We want to hear about what happens with the results of what goes on with the DNA. I know Joe. I feel that the judge and the prosecution will be fair and reasonable with that, because if the defense wants to get half of the DNA that's left and they want to use it all, I think that would be kind of bullying for them to use it all and not give them a chance to get their experts to test it. So I feel that their ruling will be in the favor of them sharing half of the half that they have, and but we'll see how that goes. And I greatly appreciate the audience. You, the viewers, is what makes this great. I want to thank you and compliment you guys all for being respectful, for being great followers and subscribers and friends of this community. Again, go over to my website, DutyRon.com, and follow me, all one word, DutyRon, on everything social media. Again, I want to say a special thank you to my guests, Joe Murray and Detective Phil Grimaldi, retired. And I will see each and every one of you on the next live stream. As I like to end these things, God bless the world. God bless the United States of America. But God bless each and every one of us here in the chat and all victims of crime across the world and their families. Good night from New York City, and thank you for joining another episode of Crime Talk, Crime Time with DutyRon. Peace and love.